Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. And guys, I got to state this right up front. When I attempt to invest long-term in the antiques and collectibles trade, I look for items that have two main characteristics. I look for organic collectability and also absolute rarity. And when you combine absolute rarity with organic collectability, if you choose a correct market, especially a market that is on the upswing or is currently in its prime, you will do very well, assuming you have the ability to sell into the hype when it's necessary to turn a profit. And this is something that a lot of people cannot do. I myself, from time to time, am emotional with some of these objects to the point where I don't let them go when I should. But just make no mistake, if you learn one thing from me on this YouTube channel, understand that if you go after a popular collecting market and you look for organic collectability and also absolute rarity, and you understand those core concepts and how they relate to value in the antiques and collectibles trade, you will do quite well. And this is something that a lot of people do not understand. And I want to make sure that you are not one of those particular individuals. So I got posed a question that I thought was very good, to the point where I am going to devote this video to answering it. And the question is, Sean, are serialized cards on par or equivalent to reserve list cards? Now, this is a very interesting question because there's a lot of bad or misinformation out there on YouTube, on TikTok, on collecting forums, because I'm going to answer this question first and you're going to hate the answer. The answer is no. We are comparing apples to oranges with this particular question. Serialized cards are not equivalent, nor are they on par with reserve list cards. Now, why are we having this discussion? Well, serialized cards are rooted in mass-produced scarcity. Reserve list cards are rooted in organic collectability. And that's the main difference. And a lot of people that are operating in these markets today, they don't understand that difference. Now, that doesn't mean if that's you and you like to go after serialized cards, maybe you also collect reserve list cards, I'm not saying you're not going to make any money. Let's be realistic. We're talking the modern era of the collectibles market at present time. A lot of these manufacturers that are limiting supply, a lot of their particular items are selling for multiples on the secondary market. When we talk about serialized cards, though, you need to understand the history and how it differs from that of the history of the reserve list. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The reserve list was a unique accident. The reserve list was something that just happened organically that had no planning really behind it. And today, it actually took Magic the Gathering in a unique direction. And that's why a lot of speculators, a lot of collectors, and a lot of investors can choose to invest in that market if they choose to. It's because of the reserve list. So before we get too far into this video where we start talking about the reserve list, let's start by talking about serialized cards and their history. Because believe it or not, serialized cards are nothing new. As a matter of fact, I've talked about them before on this particular YouTube channel with the concept of mass-produced scarcity. Now, you got to understand, the sports card trading market has been through a period of ups and downs ever since the junk wax era occurred back in the 1980s, back in the 1990s. At that particular point in time, manufacturers were overproducing a lot of product. They were dumping it on the market, and they were hoping that speculators, Timmies, Kimmies, Poindexters, collectors, investors, dealers would keep scoffing up those particular products at a premium so they could go back to their investors on Wall Street and say, hey guys, look at this. Look at that. We had another good quarter. Another good quarter. The Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters just cleaned us out again. That's what they wanted to continue to happen. Well, as it turns out, as most speculative bubbles run their course, a lot of high-profile collectors, a lot of speculators, a lot of dealers, a lot of investors started to sour on sports cards because they realized that behind the scenes, there were tons of this stuff being created. That's why today we call that particular area in sports card history, it is known as the junk wax era. Now, this is important. A lot of these companies that survived that massive speculative bubble, they went back to the drawing board and they said, you know what? We need something that's going to reignite confidence in our core collector base, in our core investor base, in our core speculator base, so that they come back to modern era sports cards en masse. They came up with the idea of limited edition products, mass-produced scarcity, serialized cards, one-on-one cards, autograph cards, refractor cards. All these concepts were being put to the test. Now, ironically, serialized cards are really nothing new. I said that before at the beginning of this video. If you go back to 1990, Donruss actually released a set of football cards known as the Pro Set that were the first set ever in sports cards history to feature serialized cards. And again, that set was released in 1990, guys. So this is not a new concept. It's just basically manufacturers wanted to find a way to attempt to restore collector and investor confidence in the modern era side of sports collecting. Because up until this particular point, everybody that went through the junk wax era was very, very soured on the idea of buying into or collecting modern era sports cards. They were all starting to gravitate towards vintage cards at this particular point in time. So a lot of these manufacturers, they came up with this idea, if we limit the product, but we sell it at an exorbitant price, the collectors on the secondary market will take care of the rest. And that's exactly what happened. The collectors, the speculators, and the investors bought it hook, line, and sinker. Now, to be fair, it wasn't a quick adoption. It took many, many years for collectors to warm up and pretty much catch on to this concept of mass-produced scarcity, or serialized cards, refractor cards, autograph cards, all this crazy stuff that a lot of these companies are now pushing out en masse in the year 2023. Now, if you've watched King of Collectibles on Netflix, you know that part of the plot related around that show is the value and the chase for one of these particularly quote-unquote rare or scarce one-of-a-kind cards. And this is where it gets interesting, because it wasn't until recently that a lot of the collectible card game manufacturers said, what can we do to prop up the value or the perceived value and rarity of our products? And they look to the sports card market and they say, look at what those guys are doing. Those guys are doing all this crazy fancy stuff with one-of-a-kind, limited edition cards, gold foil cards, refractor cards, autograph cards, and the like. Why don't we try to apply that to collectible card games? And here we are, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, pretty much trying anything, throwing spaghetti at the proverbial wall, seeing what sticks. Just hope there's not a repeat of the Magic 30 set. I don't want to go off on a rant on that, but let's just hope that that doesn't happen. But regardless, that's where this concept came from. It is rooted in mass-produced scarcity. It is not rooted in organic collectability. Now, on the other side of the equation, Magic the Gathering came out, and I don't think that a lot of people realize this. Magic the Gathering came out en masse on August 5th, 1993. By 1996, by March of 1996, the reserve list was first implemented. So literally, Magic the Gathering was not even out for a full 3 years, and Wizards of the Coast already had implemented the reserve list. Now, I don't think you guys understand how amazing that is. The reserve list was not planned. It was an organic response to collectors complaining that the value of their cards were dropping rapidly due to then Wizards of the Coast's reprint policy. And as a result, Wizards took the criticism with stride, and they said, you know what? We got an idea for you guys. We're going to come up with a listing of cards that will never, ever be reprinted again in their original form in the history of Magic the Gathering. And what do you think happened? A lot of people rallied the idea back then. Because remember, guys, Magic the Gathering in 1996 was still not guaranteed to last as long as it has to this very day. It still was not on its way to becoming a billion-dollar brand in the year 1996. I want to be very realistic about that. At any given time, this card game could have still failed. If you want proof, why do you think there's so many reserve list cards in existence today that have been used, that have been worn, that are not near mint condition, that people played with decks, with hands? They didn't put them in sleeves. There's cards out there I have seen that have who God knows what growing on them because they were organically collected. The reserve list is not rooted in mass-produced scarcity. That's why it's so controversial to this very day. When I bring up the reserve list and I tell you I'm pro-reserve list, there are people that will send me angry emails. I'll get comments every now and then in my comment section telling me I'm one of those evil investors. The reserve list happened completely organically, and it changed the trajectory of Magic the Gathering as a collectible going forward. Now, how does this relate to serialized cards? Well, let's be realistic here. Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, they sit in a boardroom. They can see what's happening with the secondary market in the year 2023 with Magic the Gathering. They know how the market now is going to respond to something like a serialized card or a one-on-one card, whatever it is. They have an idea on how the secondary market is going to respond to this particular concept, this core idea. Even the collecting community, I already covered this. Back in 1993, back in 1996, very few people were storing reserve list cards in near mint condition, thinking that they would be worth a ton of money 10, 20, 30 years later. Very few people. Back then, people were playing with these cards. As a result, those that survived, especially in near mint condition or better, and those from the earlier sets, your Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, those particular cards are coveted today simply due to their organic collectability and, in certain instances, their absolute rarity. Now, based on what I just told you, the history of serialized cards versus the history of reserve list cards, are serialized cards on par with reserve list cards? The conclusion that you should be coming to as a collector, as an investor, as a speculator, as somebody that just loves the game, is the answer is no. Does that mean serialized cards will not be sought after on the secondary market? It absolutely does not. Serialized cards, we know this for a fact, will be sought after on the secondary market. But in my opinion, over the long term, they do not have the organic collectability that an Alpha Edition Black Lotus has, that a set of Power 9 from the set of Beta have, that certain Arabian Nights cards have, that certain Antiquities cards have, like your Workshops, or even Moats from Legends, cards like that. Those are the items that I go after as an investor. I don't like to play in these gimmicky markets over the long term. If I was to get any of these serialized cards, most likely what I would do is I would wait for a peak to open up in the market and I would sell into the hype. I would have no problem selling those particular cards, those items into the open market at that particular time where I can make money on them and I can get out. That's how I would play this market. Now, I know a lot of you guys watching this, you're going to disagree. You're going to go, Sean, you don't understand. I love the game. I want to get as many of these cards as I can. I just want to put them away. I'm here to tell you that you would be better off if you get these cards and you're able to sell them at a premium. If you want to take some of that money and go after some of these really scarce or quote-unquote rare early reserve list cards, you would be better off doing that with the money than holding a lot of these serialized cards long term. Now, I know that some of you are going to disagree with me because I already know Some of these one-on-one cards that are coming out of this Lord of the Rings set, people are like, Sean, you don't understand. Somebody's willing to pay like $250,000 for this particular card if it's found. We've seen all this before, guys. It's sports cards all over again. It's just now repackaged with Magic the Gathering. I'm sure pretty soon it'll come to Pokemon and other collectible card games. Don't fall for the trap. I'm not saying if you already have an awesome collection of reserve list cards and you can afford to play in this market, you want to diversify into this market, you do you. But ultimately, I like organic collectability and absolute rarity, not just absolute rarity as a result of mass-produced scarcity. Do you see the difference? Again, when you come to me and you tell me, Sean, serialized cards are the same as reserve list cards, I'm looking at you like you're crazy because you're comparing apples to oranges. One is rooted in mass-produced scarcity, the other is rooted in organic collectability. Now, to be fair, there's one other talking point I got to make before I end this video. A lot of you are going to say to me, well, Sean, what if I'm investing in late reserve list cards? Cards from Mirage, cards from Tempest, cards from Ice Age, cards from Fallen Empires. In that case, in all honesty, you're probably better off in most cases going after the serialized cards because we already know the potential, the monetary potential of most of those cards. Fallen Empires, Ice Age, even Mirage, there are a lot of those cards out there on the secondary market. They are not as scarce as what I call the big six. Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, Arabian Nights, Antiquities, and Legends. They're the 6 Magic the Gathering sets I like to focus on as an investor. Now, to be fair, I like Alpha and Beta better than Unlimited, obviously. I like Arabian Nights and Antiquities just a little bit better than Legends, but Legends has a lot of potential. I do not like any of the later sets. I do not like the Dark. I do not like Visions. I kind of like the Urza's block, but overall, I don't consider it as iconic as the earlier sets that I just mentioned. So if you are thinking of only going after cards that are in Mirage or Ice Age or Fallen Empires or, heaven forbid, Homelands, I would tell you, in that case, you're probably better off knowing what the market will bear for those cards, going after these serialized cards. So I hope that answers your question because I get this question a lot. Again, serialized cards are not on par or equivalent with reserve list cards. If you are looking at this market from that perspective, you don't get it. You're not investing. You have an emotional attachment to these items and you just want to justify buying them. Again, that doesn't mean you can't make money in these markets with mass-produced scarcity, but you have to keep your hands on the proverbial pulse. You have to take advantage of an opening in the market to turn a profit. I hope that helps. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and have a great night.